Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new contents.
Wow, you're so lucky, you know. You found a piece of red zircon. Winston grabbed James's hand and shook it crazily. He looked like he had gone crazy. That kind of excitement was simply indescribable. Red zircon, what is that? Is it very precious? James frowned and asked Winston. Of course. It is a very high-quality diamond called fire diamond. It looks like a bright red flame. It is the rarest diamond in the world. Winston could not suppress the excitement in his heart. He explained to James while waving his hands and legs. Oh, fire diamond. Got it. After hearing Winston's explanation, James just nodded his head calmly. Ah, my friend, aren't you excited? Winston looked at James in different reaction and immediately spread his hands and asked. Yes, I am very excited, James said to Winston with a smile. However, Winston felt that this was not the answer he wanted at all. He felt that it was necessary for him to give James a deeper explanation. Hey, listen to me. I think you probably don't understand what I mean. The fire diamond you found is even more precious than the purple diamond that the stone gatherer found here last time. Do you understand? In other words, if his purple diamond is worth $800 million, then your fire diamond is worth at least $1 billion. Friend, shouldn't you be more excited? Winston excitedly explained to James. He was so excited that he almost jumped up. However, James just nodded and said calmly, Yes, it's really exciting to have such a harvest from the first stone mining experience. However, his performance was completely different from the answer that Winston wanted. Winston even felt that this guy's brain had some problems. Otherwise, he would not be excited about picking up $1 billion for free. However, Winston did not understand that the young man standing in front of him was a billion-dollar giant. A mere $1 billion was just a drop in the bucket for him. Naturally, he would not be excited. The reason why he followed him to pick stones was not to make a fortune, but to experience this special profession with him. James saw that Winston was a little speechless, so he changed the topic and said to him, Hey Winston, I think we should pick it up first. Otherwise, if we discuss it for a while, it might not be ours. James had already realized that there seemed to be a lot of people who were coming in their direction. In order to prevent accidents from happening, he felt it was better to pick it up first. Otherwise, that thing still had no owner. Right. Winston hurriedly nodded. Then he took out a professional tool and quickly approached the lava pool that was constantly solidifying. He prepared to pick up the red zircon. Hey, listen to me, buddy. You better put that thing down. It doesn't belong to you. However, just as Winston picked up the red zircon from the lava pool, a very discordant voice suddenly came from not too far away. Winston turned his head to look and saw a tall fellow wearing protective clothing looking at him in an extremely unfriendly manner from the right. Beside him, there were 5 or 6 strong men wearing protective clothing that were about the same size as him. Naturally, Winston knew this man. His name was Shawn, and he was also a stone gatherer who was active in the volcanoes of the entire island of ice. However, he couldn't afford to offend this guy because he had a stone gatherer gang. That gang's name was Solomon, and it meant that they were from hell. Solomon was a big gang in Reykjavik. In fact, it already had some characteristics of underground gangs. However, because of its secrecy, there had never been any evidence against it. Thus, he continued to exist there. Although many people felt that he was illegal, there was no evidence. And Winston naturally understood that their backing was definitely not as simple as not having any evidence. Although he was also a person of character, he understood that this was someone he could not afford to offend. Therefore, he did not say anything. He only looked at James with a vexed expression. Then he returned the red zircon that he was holding onto the lava pool. It seems like you know me, but your performance was very good. I can tell you happily that your actions just now saved your life. Hurry up and thank God, then get lost. Seeing that Winston was very sensible and put down the precious red zircon, he immediately grinned and laughed wildly. Seems that you know me, but your performance was very good. That arrogant laughter, even though separated by the protective helmet, made James feel an abnormal disgust. Then James saw Winston run towards him with a dispirited face and pull him away. It was as if he was afraid that if he walked a bit slower, the opponent would threaten his life, and he didn't dare to breathe loudly. But James grabbed Winston and asked, What? "Hey Winston, that thing was discovered by me. Why'd you run away?" In fact, James had already understood everything. He only said it to those tall Ottoman people on purpose. This precious red zircon was actually not important to him. It was just $1 billion US. To him, it was a small amount of money. However, if it was snatched away just like that, he, James, would never agree to it. He would never allow such a thing to happen. From the beginning, when he first discovered this red zircon, he had never had the idea of secretly taking it or forcefully splitting half of it with James. Under the huge temptation of benefits, Winston was still able to maintain a clear mind. He did not have any excessive thoughts. This kind of kindness touched James very much. He even felt that giving this red zircon to him would not be a problem at all. However, to be snatched away by someone so forcefully, he was sorry. He, James, would definitely not agree. However, James's loud questions shocked Winston. He quickly waved his hand to signal James to stop talking. Then he said in a low voice, "I don't have time to explain to you. We can't afford to offend this group of people. Hurry up and leave, or we might lose our lives." There's actually a little fool. On the other side, when those few Ottomans heard James's words, they immediately burst into laughter. Shawn also shook his body, then walked towards the red zircon, preparing to directly take away his spoils of war. That arrogant look was simply indescribable with the word arrogant. But at this moment, Winston discovered that James, who was in front of him, disappeared from where he stood with a swoosh. When he reappeared, he was already standing in front of the lava puddle. He was just separated by a layer of protective gloves and did not use any professional tools. He directly grabbed the red zircon from the high temperature of the lava. Then he said to Shawn, who was a step slower, "This thing was discovered by me. Why doesn't it belong to us?" James's speed and his action of picking up the red zircon with his bare hands caused everyone's eyeballs to fall to the ground in shock. Especially Shawn, who was the closest to James, was completely stunned. But then he stared at James and sneered. You stupid man. I said that thing doesn't belong to you, so it doesn't belong to you. Do you understand?" But James also stared at him and said without showing any weakness, "Then you stupid multicolored bird, I will tell you one thing today. The thing that belongs to me has never been taken away by anyone." The two of them were less than 5 meters away from each other, forming a confrontation. "Haha, is that so? You stupid man, you don't even know what kind of fatal mistake you've made. Just wait, you'll regret it." Shawn laughed and pointed at James. Then he waved his hand, gesturing to the person behind him, and yelled, "Hey brothers, this man doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth is very arrogant. Let's teach him a lesson." As soon as Shawn's voice faded, a strong guy behind him roared angrily and rushed towards James like a madman. It seemed that he was a strength-type opponent. When he ran, the ground, which had not yet solidified, kept shaking like an earthquake. This scene made the hearts of the four beauties in the distance tighten. But because they were too far away, they had no idea what had actually happened between them and James. They couldn't tell why they were fighting to this extent. However, they did not think that James would be at a disadvantage. It was just that the terrain in the crater was complicated. The surroundings were filled with hot lava. They were worried that James might accidentally fall into the lava flow. He was a handsome man, but if he was burned, he would not look good. "Krista, what should we do about this?" Cindy was the first to ask. Her voice sounded like she was about to cry. She was a rational and calm person, but now that she saw her beloved James in danger at the volcano, her mind was in chaos. However, Krista also shook her head. Her face was full of worry too, indicating that she had no idea what to do. Look, just now I asked you all to advise him, but you all refused to listen to me and let him do as he pleased. Now this is not good. What should we do?" Cindy became somewhat impatient and complained. However, the other three women looked at her, not daring to speak. What she said was right. Just now they indeed did not dissuade James. Now that James was facing such a dangerous situation, they naturally could not speak. Krista said even more calmly, "Cindy, don't worry. We have to believe in James's ability. He will definitely be fine." Cindy was a smart person. She knew that it was useless to be anxious at this moment, so she nodded. At this time, inside the volcano crater, Winston saw that the people with Shawn wanted to attack James. He immediately woke up from his shock and hurriedly rushed forward to block the enemies from attacking James. He stopped the strong man who was rushing forward and said loudly, Hey, wait, Shawn, we can talk. Don't attack him. My friend has a problem with his brain. Sane, don't argue with him. After saying that, Winston quickly turned around and glared at James. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, You don't value your life anymore, or what? Quick, throw that red zircon to them, otherwise you and I will die today. Winston's tone was unusually serious, but James understood that this was his greatest goodwill. Even in such a dangerous moment, he did not want to only escape by himself. He could have easily left James alone, but he didn't do such a thing, so this person was worth making friends with. Did you hear that? Hurry up! Winston saw that James was frozen on the spot as if he had been scared silly. He approached him and whispered to him again. This time James smiled and said, Winston, thank you. I would like to have a friend like you. After saying that, James threw the red zircon to the arrogant Ottoman Shawn. Then he grinned and said, Hey, buddy, help me take it. If he gets hurt later, I'll let you taste the taste of lava. At this time, the red zircon was a scourge. Naturally, he would not hand it over to Winston because that would harm him. The one who could help him safeguard it naturally was Shawn, because handing it over to anyone would be the same. In the end, they were the only servants who helped him take care of the red zircon for free. Shawn looked at the red zircon flying towards him as if he was looking at $1 billion being thrown at him. He did not bother about what James said and quickly and carefully caught it. It was as gentle as a baby. What he did not know, however, was that after James threw out the red zircon, he turned into a shadow and ran towards one of Shawn's companions at an extremely fast speed. With just one punch, he sent the brawny man who had just rushed forward but was stopped by Winston, flying backwards. In the next moment, James swam around in the volcano, and with a speed that was not human, he knocked down all of Shawn's subordinates one by one. These guys were far weaker than the professional security guards. James did not even exert much strength, and in just 10 seconds they had completely lost their ability to fight. This scene stunned Winston once again. Even the surrounding stone gatherers who were eyeing them covetously began to retreat. Their eyes revealed indescribable fear. This speed, this level of combat power, was he even human? If it weren't for James wearing the same protective suit as theirs, they would have thought that James was a monster that came out of the crater. It was only after James finished off all of his companions within 10 seconds that Shawn realized that the atmosphere around him seemed to be a little strange after he had just properly arranged the red zircon. Then he looked around and found that his companions were all lying on the ground, screaming in pain. He exclaimed, "Oh my God, what happened just now?" James looked at him and grinned. "It's nothing. I just exercised my muscles and bones." "You!" Shawn's face instantly became extremely ugly, but his eyes showed fear. He had never thought that a human would actually possess such a powerful combat strength. However, in such a short period of time after he received Winston, the other party had already taken care of all his companions. This was simply inconceivable. I've said this before. Nobody can take anything from me. You wouldn't want to get me mad, would you? Because even I'm afraid of myself when I get angry, James growled. But who was Shawn? He was just the leader of the Skulls Gang, a typical gang member. How could he be willing to give back the $1 billion to James just like that? Therefore, after hearing what he said, he sneered and said, "Is that so? Stupid man. I really want to see your angry face then." After saying that, Shawn slowly took out a pistol from his waist and pointed it at James. He showed an arrogant and proud smile. Even after facing the black muzzle of the gun, Shawn realized that not only did the young man not have a trace of fear in his eyes, but he was also abnormally calm. There was even a hint of ridicule in his eyes. The The scene of him expecting the other party to be so scared that his legs went soft and then kowtowed to him did not appear. The two men once again formed a short confrontation across a gun. This place originally had a strong smell of sulfur, but now it was covered up by the intense smell of gunpowder between the two of them. Facing the gun, James was not nervous at all. He smiled coldly and said, "Hey, buddy, before you pull the trigger, I advise you to think it through." "Shut up." Shawn was probably shocked by James' calmness as he wanted to prove that the gun in his hand was real, but he actually shot at James's feet. The dull gunshot broke the silence, but it did not cause much noise in the rumbling volcano. "Now you know that the gun in my hand is not a joke, right?" Shawn said proudly to James. Unexpectedly, James had already arrived in front of him. You... Shawn looked like he had seen a ghost. He was almost scared out of his wits. He raised the gun in his hand and was about to continue pulling the trigger at James. However, he realized that he could not pull the trigger no matter how hard he tried. It was only then that he realized that James's finger had unknowingly been stuck at the position where he had pulled the trigger. Then James did not move. The gun in his hand appeared in James's hand like magic. Shawn fell to the ground and was completely shocked. "What kind of divine technique is this?" Shawn felt as if he was having an unrealistic dream. James pointed the gun at Shawn's forehead. That guy was such a big leader, but he was so scared that his whole body trembled. Don't shoot. The thing is yours." Shawn looked at James and said that with a trembling voice. He no longer had the arrogance from before. However, James only shook his head. The gun in his hand instantly fell to the ground. Shawn was dumbfounded once again. Ding, 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 ding. However, James only shook his hand. The gun in his hand instantly fell to the ground. Shawn was dumbfounded once again. Do you think you deserve to be killed?" James coldly snorted and said in disdain. Then he stretched out his hand and Shawn respectfully handed the crystal to James. James grabbed it and shouted at the stunned Winston, "Hey, stop daydreaming. Keep it well. Let's go." Only then did Winston wake up from his daze. He could not believe what had just happened. He quickly packed up the red zircon that James handed over and put it away as he quickly followed James out of the crater. Shawn, who had fallen to the ground, watched James's departing figure. Although he was reluctant to part with them, he did not dare to have any indecent thoughts anymore, because James's eyes really had killing intent. He was like a lion that was about to hunt. If he went too far here, that guy would probably treat him to a taste of the lava. However, the viciousness in his eyes exposed his ambition to never give up. That was $1 billion, a whole $1 billion. How many people in the world could resist such temptation? Money can make people do anything, even if it means putting their lives in danger. All of them were just moths to the flame. Ah, the charm of money. "James, are you okay? James, oh my God! James, you're not hurt?" James and Winston had just walked out of the crater when the four women swarmed over and asked anxiously and concernedly, "What can happen to me?" James laughed and looked at the four girls. He stretched out his hand and turned around, indicating that he was safe and sound. The four girls did not know whether to laugh or cry. They all hugged James, and after a series of fancy punches and kicks, he told them not to worry about him in the future. That scene was so bewildering that even a middle-aged man like Winston turned his head around in embarrassment. It did not seem strange that there were multiple wives in the social system overseas, but this young man in front of him was unreal. He actually had 4 beautiful women in his arms at the same time. They seemed to get along very well with each other. This was very rare. Mr. Tucker, personally, I think we should leave this place as soon as possible." It seemed like Winston had just recovered from his shock. His mind had regained some rationality, and he coughed dryly and said, "Oh, right. James nodded and agreed with him. Although he was not afraid of those guys, this was a place of wrongs, not to mention that he had 4 women with him. "Mr. Tucker, this is for you." After that, Winston handed the red zircon back to James. However, James waved his hand and said, "Winston, it's fine. Leave it at your place. I will find you to get it after we return to Reykjavik." Winston was obviously hesitant. First, it was because James trusted him, and second, it was because he didn't want to keep this hot potato at all. He didn't have the ability to protect this thing at all. James instantly understood Winston's meaning. He took the crystal with one hand and said, "All right, I'll keep it myself, but don't worry, this thing was discovered by us together. I will definitely thank you." Winston waved his hand and said, No, Mr. Tucker. This is the thing you found. It has nothing to do with me. Of course, my house is in Reykjavik. I welcome you to my house as a guest." After saying that, Winston left his phone number and turned to leave. He had never shown any greed toward such a valuable red zircon from the beginning to the end. This made James look at him in a new light. James quickly took off his protective suit and smiled at the beauties. "Let's go, beauties. We should go home now." On the ridge, James looked back at the mouth of the Faraday volcano, which looked like a devil's eye, and grinned. He felt that this was really a wonderful trip. Not only had he obtained a valuable red zircon, but he had also experienced a very unique experience that he would never forget for the rest of his life. When he returned, Vanessa, who was once on the top 3 young racers in New York City, volunteered to drive. Of course, James would be happy to relax a little. He sat in the passenger seat and carefully looked at the red zircon that was the size of a baby's fist. Only then did he realize that it was indeed worthy of being called something worth $1 billion. It was really too beautiful. Overall, it was very eye-catching. It was like a cluster of dancing flames. That strange and dazzling color made James feel intoxicated. He felt that it did not seem to be any less than the 3 gems that he obtained in Madagascar. When he obtained the 3 gemstones, he had given 1 to each of the 3 women. Now only Cindy, who had just joined, was left. They were all his women. He definitely couldn't be biased against them, right? With this thought in mind, James casually handed the red zircon in his hand to Cindy and asked, "Cindy, take a look at this. Do you like it?" Women naturally had no resistance against gems, not to mention a rare fire diamond like this. She immediately smiled and nodded. "Of course I like it." "It's good that you like it. Then it's yours now." James waved his hand and said, But James..." Cindy still wanted to say something, but at this time Vanessa, Krista, and Katie all looked at her and smiled. Vanessa's driving skills were great. Although she was lacking a little when compared to James, it didn't make her anything less than a world-class racer. She was very good overall. They arrived in Reykjavik before dark and returned to the hotel. Because of the tiring day, the group ordered some food at the hotel and then went back to their rooms to rest after a meal. At this moment, James told the girls to stay in his room and not to run around. He then called Winston. They had been separated too quickly, so James hadn't had time to return his protective suit to him. He wanted to give it back to Winston and visit him at the same time. James felt that there was a lot Winston wanted to say to him but failed to do so. So he left the phone number behind as if he wanted to let James contact him after he returned to Reykjavik. "Hello, this is Winston." The phone was quickly picked up and Winston's voice came from the other end. "Hello, Winston. It's James. Tell me where you live. I'll send you your protective suit right away," James said over the phone. "Oh, hello, Mr. Tucker. Thank you so much." Winston seemed very excited when he received James' call. He quickly told James the address of their house and hung up the phone. Winston's house was located in the south of the city near the sea. The city of Reykjavik was not very big, so James quickly located his house according to the location. It was a 3-story house, a typical Nordic building. The blue outer wall and the red roof instantly displayed the unique style of the island of ice, giving people a different feeling. In front of the house, there was a small courtyard of about 20 square meters. The courtyard would usually be filled with all kinds of flowers and plants. However, the weather was too cold in this season, so there was no bright color in the flower pots. After James parked the car, he carried the protective suit and got out of the car as he walked to the small courtyard in front of the house. The door of the courtyard was open and the house was brightly lit. However, he did not see Winston coming out to welcome him, which made James feel a little strange. Is this guy not hospitable at all? James muttered to himself. Then he confirmed the number on the door again and checked to see if he had walked in the right direction. He walked towards the small courtyard with big steps. Hey, who are you? A girl's clear voice suddenly came from outside the courtyard. James turned around and saw that it was a person wearing a white hat. She wore a mask on her face, and her face could not be seen clearly. She was pushing a red bicycle in her hand, and it seemed like she had run into him when she had come home. That was why she had asked that question. Oh, I'm here to find... Oh my God, it's you! James was about to explain to her that he was here to find Winston and ask her not to misunderstand, but before he could finish, he was interrupted by the woman. She threw away the bicycle in her hand and rushed to James. She smiled at him and said, Why did you come to my house? Did you come to find me? The woman was very close to James at the moment, but she was still wearing a mask. He could not see her face, so James was not sure who he was looking at. He just felt that she was a little familiar with him. This sudden scene made James feel very embarrassed. He scratched his head and covered up his embarrassment. Then he asked, Miss, do we know each other? Mr. Tucker, it's me. I am Sarah. The woman seemed to have realized her recklessness and rudeness. She quickly pulled down her mask, revealing her delicate and pretty face, which was adorned with a smile. Her smile was especially brilliant, revealing the two dimples on her cheeks. It was obvious that she was very happy to see James. As for James, he was instantly stunned and froze on the spot. After a long time, he finally recovered his senses and said with a smile, My God, this is really unbelievable. It turns out to be you, Sarah. Oh, right. Why are you here? The two of them paused for a moment and laughed. They had asked each other the same question. The feeling was very tacit, and then both of them laughed at the same time. In order to prevent such a thing from happening again, James suddenly reached out his hand in a gentlemanly manner and said, Ladies first. Sarah was very generous. She immediately nodded and said, All right, I'll say it first. It's very simple because this is my home. So I'm just coming back from work. What about you? After Sarah finished speaking, her eyes revealed a look of anticipation. She thought in her heart, This man didn't come especially to find me, right? Home, you said this is your home? Although James already had some guesses in his heart, he still felt that it was very unbelievable. Yes, that's right, Sarah nodded and replied with certainty. I'm actually here to see Winston. When Sarah heard Winston's name, a look of disbelief appeared in her eyes. She then asked, How do you know Winston? That's my father. Interesting story here. James laughed and then quickly and concisely described how he and Winston had met during the day. After hearing this, Sarah felt that it was too unbelievable. She quickly stretched out her hand and said, Mr. Tucker, please come in. My grandfather will definitely like you very much. Sarah walked side by side with James into the foreign house. As soon as they entered, she shouted loudly, Hey, Dad, your guest is here. Why don't you take the initiative to come out and welcome him? Sarah is back. Then James heard a gentle voice in the kitchen. A woman with a kind face poked her head outside of the kitchen in an apron. Didn't your father go out to greet his friends a long time ago? She asked. Yes, your mother is right, my baby. In the living room, an old and kind voice came. It was Sarah's grandfather, Wiley. That's right. He also said that he was a very important friend. Your grandfather will definitely be very happy after seeing him. Sarah's grandmother, who was sitting beside Wiley, also quickly echoed. Sarah handed James a pair of warm shoes and said, That's all strange. His guests are all here. Why didn't I see him when I came back? Sarah replied and then said, Mr. Tucker, quickly come in. My father's such a careless person sometimes. I hope you don't take offense. It's fine, it's fine. After James entered the house, Winston's wife and Sarah's grandparents came out to welcome James. That kind of hospitality really touched him. He was especially intrigued to meet Winston's father, Wiley. When he saw that James was actually such a kind person, he couldn't stop smiling. He quickly pulled James to the living room and sat him down. After that, Sarah introduced her family to James one by one. Winston's absence didn't make James feel awkward because of how talkative Sarah and Wiley were. This kind of atmosphere was very good, making James feel very comfortable and relaxed. He felt very homely and at peace.